Hi, my name is Paul Rodney Turner. I'm the director and founder of Food for Life Global, the world's largest plant-based food relief, and I went vegan in 1998. And the reason I went vegan was actually I was a vegetarian since the age of 19, and at that particular time I didn't really know much about vegetarianism, or to speak of veganism. But in 1998 I was visiting a lot of the conferences on veganism and animal rights conferences and so on. And it was during that time that I actually started to realize the impact of animal agriculture on the planet and people and consciousness and so on. So that focused me on, okay, I've got to make this decision to go vegan. I've got to represent our charity. Our charity has to go vegan. And for that reason, we never looked back, because I realized then that this was the path forward. We had to be vegan. We had to be a plant-based, pure plant-based organization in order to be consistent with who we represented and what we stood for.
Back up to going vegetarian, what exactly made you do that?
I became a vegetarian, well, initially at the age of 16. I read a book. It was called Life Comes from Life. It was a Hindu book, a Hare Krishna book, and it basically talked about how life comes from life, meaning that the essence of life is spirituality. That life is not simply we're not simply a combination of chemicals, we're not just physical forms, but there's a consciousness which animates this physical form. And that made me realize, okay, if there's consciousness, if there's a soul, then that means that we're all energetically connected. So it changed my perception about how I looked at other life forms, other animals, and I realized, okay, I can't eat them anymore. Unfortunately, I didn't have much good association at the time, and I wasn't able to maintain that vow of being a vegetarian. So I broke it after some point, because I was practically the only vegetarian in the whole area. And even my mother, she didn't have any idea what to cook for vegetarian. So she would prepare like a traditional Australian meal: chops, mashed potatoes, boiled vegetables. And she would just give me the mashed potatoes because I didn't like peas or vegetables. I used to just eat fruit and potato. And after a while, I just couldn't maintain it. But then a few years on, when I turned 19, I was at college, and a Seventh-day Adventist friend of mine, he gave me a magazine on vegetarianism, and he opened my eyes to the impacts of that diet and how, it's just not natural to our biology. The impact it has on the environment and so on. And so just that night, I read that magazine from cover to cover, and I decided, okay, I'm a vegetarian now, and that's it. So I remained being a vegetarian from that point, and a few months after that, I decided to take a really big step and become a monk. And becoming a monk was probably the most radical thing I could ever do, because, at that age, 19, the hormones are racing, the ego is strong, and yet I was just enthusiastic to make this decision to shave my head, dive into spirituality, and start asking the big questions of life and learning about, what the purpose of life is.
And do you think that might have helped prime you up to go vegan?
I would say so. I mean, that experience of being a monk from the age of 19 to 33 was really transformative. And going back, how I got to that point is another interesting story. Mm-hmm. At the age of 15, I was an amateur astronomer. So I was your regular kid, a regular Australian boy, playing football, playing cricket, chasing girls. I mean, just normal, young boy behavior. But I was also very philosophical. And at the age of 15, I decided to become an amateur astronomer. So myself and my best friend, Jeff Castles, we would stay up at night looking at the night sky. We couldn't afford a telescope. I think we had a pair of binoculars, but we'd sit up all night just studying the stars. And there was no drugs involved, if you think that somehow we're like tripping or whatever. No, there was no drugs. It was just pure curiosity. We would sit up all night looking for meteor showers, looking for UFOs, looking at the stars. We learned the Greek alphabet so that we could understand the magnitude of the stars, and we could read the stars like the night sky like a map. That was about a year to 1 or 2 years, and so that planted the seed. During that time, it planted the seed of, why are we here? We're so small, the universe is so big, so amazing. There's got to be an intelligence behind this. There's something that I've not been told in school, There's something magical out there. And I wanted to know what that answer was. I wanted to know, why are we here? What is the purpose of life? Why are we so small? The universe is so massive. That planted the seed, and that later on fueled me to take that decision to become a monk and get those answers.
I would like to learn a little bit more how the vegan transition occurred.
Well, it was more about, I was attending the Summerfest.
Vegan Summerfest?
Yeah, Vegan Summerfest in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania.
What year was that?
In 1996, from 96, 97, 98. The first one I attended was in 1996. And it was during that time I became exposed to all these knowledgeable vegans.
Wasn't it Vegetarian Summerfest then?
Yeah, it was Vegetarian Summerfest, because it's the Vegetarian Society of North America, but they're totally vegan. It was when I, was listening to the lectures and the science, the nutrition facts, the animal agriculture. That was a big one. I realized, oh my God, okay, dairy cows are really abused. I can't put up with this. I can't justify drinking dairy anymore because I'm just contributing to the problem. And at that time, as a monk, I'm a Krishna monk, Hindu monk, and obviously dairy is a big part of their whole cuisine. I mean, protecting cows are sacred. And that's another interesting experience that I had. I mean, there's a lot of positives, but there's also negatives. The positive was that I learned to understand how we're all interdependent. We all serve each other. All life is part of an ecosystem perfectly designed by whatever you call it, Mother Nature, divine intelligence. Everyone has their part to play. We're all meant to serve each other. Every single bug, every blade of grass, every herb has a service to perform for the entire ecosystem, so everything is important. That was not something that I realized early on in life. I had more of this exploitive, controlling mentality, which most of us have growing up. It's like, you got to be strong, you got to defeat the enemy, you got to push people down. This whole consciousness of like pushing everything down in order to get up. But that's completely opposite in the spiritual realm. In the spiritual realm, it's all about lifting other people up. It's all about service. That's how you advance, by service. And so through that experience of being a monk, that answer came to me that, okay, the purpose of life is not simply to be successful materially. That's okay if you want to be successful in the material realm. That's fine. But at the same time, you have to nourish your spirit, because ultimately we are spiritual beings. We're energetic beings. We're not simply physical form. And the way you nourish your consciousness is through service. The innate characteristic of the soul is service. The innate characteristic of sugar is sweetness. You can't separate that quality from sugar. If I take sweetness out of sugar, it's not sugar anymore. So similarly, service, pure service, unconditional service, is what defines us as spiritual beings, as energetic beings. When we serve, we nourish ourselves. When we serve, we feel content and satisfied.
Did you see like a specific presentation on this dairy that really pushed you into the vegan?
I'm trying to remember it's a long time ago. It was like Dr. Clapper or someone was giving a presentation. Maybe it was Ray Sikora. It was one of those animal activists, and she just made a lot of sense. Oh my God, okay, I get it now. Yeah. This is really, the dairy industry is horrible. It's probably worse than the meat industry in many ways, because they're fueling it. It's because of them that the meat industry exists. So I realized, okay, I can't justify this anymore. I have to make a stance. I'm going to be a vegan. And everyone around me was vegetarian. I mean, my whole organization was vegetarian. Food for Life, global. But I made a policy, okay, we're going to be plant-based, pure vegan, and we're not going to support any vegetarian projects. So it took a while for a lot of them to transition over the years, but that became our official policy at Food for Life Global.
And you did this, like when you saw that presentation, it was that day.
Oh yeah, I'm like that. If I've convinced of something, it's like, that's it, done. I'm very determined. And I think that also came from my experience of being a monk. I mean, it really transformed my consciousness. Because I give the example, it's like being a spiritual marine. I mean, you can imagine how transformative an experience like that is. So from the age of 19, I'm literally shaving my head, killing my ego. When I looked in the mirror that day, I thought, wow, I'm really not this body. I mean, all my long hair is on the floor now, and I've just, changed who I really am, the way I perceive myself. So it was very powerful, and then I'm not sleeping on a bed, I'm sleeping on the floor with a sleeping bag, I'm taking cool showers, I'm living a very regulated life. Breakfast is this time, lunch is this time, dinner is this time, there's no snacking in between, 100% celibate, very limited like exposure to the public. I mean, I did interact, like my first service was actually feeding the homeless in Sydney. But for the most part, I lived a very cloistered, very like protected life. I studied the scriptures and chanting for mantras for 2 hours a day, working hard, but just focusing on my spiritual development. It was a very, very powerful experience. The thing with Food for Life, it has roots going back to '74. Yeah, so even before I was a part of this, even before I was a monk. So in 1974, Swami Prabhupada, who was a Vedic scholar, he was in India, a part of India called Mayapur, and they just had a festival, and there was a big feast, and everyone had their lunch, and then the way they would eat their food was on banana leaf plates, right? And it's very eco-friendly because they would, rice and dal and whatever, and the vegetables were on this banana leaf plates, and then when they finished, they just threw the plate over the fence, and the cows would eat it. It's like...
It's like you weren't even there.
Yeah, it's perfect. But this particular occasion, he looked out his window and he saw children making a ruckus, and he thought, what's going on there? And he saw young village children fighting with dogs, the street dogs, over the scraps of food. They were literally like trying to get the remnants of the food off the banana leaf plate. And the dogs were like aggressive and trying to get the same thing. And he thought, oh my God, this can't happen. This is not acceptable. Wherever there's a temple of God, no one should go hungry. So that famous phrase became the thing which initiated what we now call Food for Life. He says, no one within 10 miles of our temple should ever go hungry. So he said to his students then, make sure you feed all these people. Every single day go out and make sure everyone's fed and no one is hungry. So that was back in '74, and then so there were projects developing in India, but nothing really happening outside of India. But in 1980, a couple of the monks decided, hey, we're going to do a soup kitchen at the back of the temple in Sydney. So they started cooking food and just serving the homeless people in Sydney, in King's Cross, which is a very famous area for drugs and homeless and just really crazy people. So they were feeding people, and it got amazing attention. So the temple started realizing, okay, this is great. This is like, people like us doing this, let's do more of it. I actually visited that as a non-monk, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then 3 years later, I decided to become a monk, and just so happened that my first service was being involved in that project, preparing food and serving the homeless. So that was my first experience, and then I was different from your average monk in the sense that where most monks are just focused on their spiritual development and it's sort of a bit of a selfish pursuit, I had a bigger vision of what this represented, what could happen with this Food for Life project. And I realized, okay, this is not only a great way to like feed bellies, but it has something inherent in it that it can actually transform consciousness. It is bigger than even the temple. This is something which is universally accepted, the idea of sharing food, expressing love and respect for other people. So 10 years in, 1993, I'd really taken up, the banner of like promoting this project and developing it around the world. And at that particular time, there was maybe a dozen projects around the world, Food for Life projects around the world. And I thought, okay, we need to expand this. We need to do bigger. And I left Australia in 1993, and I migrated to the United States. And my mentor, whose name was Mukunda Goswami, he was a Swami. So he was a celibate monk for like 40 years. He said, okay, let's set up a headquarters. Let's develop this. Let's create educational materials and training materials and so on. So in 1995, we officially created Food for Life Global with the purpose of actually expanding it around the world. And I began traveling. And so from that point on until today, I've actually visited 72 countries. And I've been to war zones and seen the worst of the worst in the world and responded to some of the greatest disasters, natural disasters, in order to set up this project. I've given lectures in 100 countries. in order to train the volunteers and expand it. Now, to date, we have over 250 projects in 65 countries. And we're serving at least 1 million meals a day, and sometimes 1.5 million meals every day. And these are freshly cooked vegan meals. It's not prepackaged, it's not frozen. It's that day, the rice is washed, the beans are washed, the vegetables are cut and washed, the food is prepared that day and served directly to the public. There's no middle person. And it's quite extraordinary because at the level that we operate, at that volume, 1.5 million meals a day, which by the way is about 16 meals a second, which is pretty amazing. At the level that we operate, that's unheard of to make freshly cooked meals. It's always prepackaged, it's always like frozen, it's never freshly cooked. So that's another distinguishing factor that we have at Food for Life Global.
That's incredible. Wow. This is probably one of the most incredible things I've experienced in a long time. And overall, I think you said at one point it was like 1 billion meals.
Well, I mean, obviously this is a guesstimate,
Yeah.
but I believe, and we're keeping a running tally on the website, it's at least 8 billion meals have been served.
How many?
8 billion.
8 billion.
8. Number 8. 8 billion meals have been served since the inception of, since 1974. So it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
And the website is Food for Life Global?
Foodforlife.org or ffl.org. We are very lucky to get the 3-letter domain.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you are. And you're here today in Fort Lauderdale for an event that I got to meet you at, and that was the Vegan Fitness and Health Expo.
Well, thankfully to Jeff Palmer, Jeff and Vanessa, they invited our charity to the event and actually made Food for Life Global the recipient charity, like the charity that the organization or the event would sponsor. So we got, a donation from that. People came up and they bought T-shirts and people made donations. It was really, really great. And I got the opportunity to share what Food for Life Global is all about. So, because as I mentioned to you, we're the biggest food relief in the world that a lot of people still don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we fly under the radar. Yeah. And I guess it's because we just haven't spent a lot of money on marketing. We're sort of just doing the work. Even myself, for the most of my career at Food for Life Global, I've been a volunteer. I pay myself a wage now, but it's like basic wage. I don't even pay myself a lot of money because it's service to me. It's what defines who I am today.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious, what is your primary source of income, or what was it at least?
Food for Life Global started in 1995 officially. I got married, so I was still a monk. I got married in 1997. This is another area where I was very different from the average monk. While I was a monk, I was teaching myself web development. I was teaching myself graphic design, public relations, copywriting. So whereas other monks were like just studying the scripture, I'm trying to educate myself, expand my consciousness, expand my awareness, my skills. For whatever reason, I just thought, well, if I have these skills, I can do better service to the charity. And that ended up really serving me well because in 1998, when I did get married, I had the skills to start a web development business. And I had a money-making opportunity right away. And this is early on. Literally, Food for Life Global had it was probably one of the first charities in the world with a website in 1995. We had a website in 95. So well before many of the Fortune 500 companies. And so then I built a portfolio of websites. I designed websites for Heineken, Amstel, Marriott Hotels, CBS Television. So I had all of these opportunities because there was not much competition. Yeah. And then in 2000, the World Bank called and offered me an opportunity at the World Bank. And so then for the next 10 years, I was building websites and designing for the World Bank. So that was mostly my form of income. And then Food for Life was either voluntary or just, I would pay myself like a couple $100 a month or something, just something petty. So for the most part, I've had other ways to bring in money. I'm very entrepreneurial. And all the businesses that I do are social enterprises. But I have done, like for example, I was a very good billiards player. This is another interesting side of the story here. I was at the level where I could have played professional billiards.
You should have showed off last night at the kava bar.
Yeah, I don't want to. Oh, you have to pay, because the thing is with that is that you have to pay for the game, and the game goes too quick. It's not worth the money. So no really good player will play on those tables. It's too quick. I remember one time I was at the World Bank, and there was like a Christmas party, and I just joined this department, and the head of the department, the manager, says, "Oh, you want to have a game of pool, Paul?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll play." And we're playing like in teams, and they says, "Well, do you want to break?" I said, "Yeah, I'll break." And then I broke the balls and ran out, and no one even got a shot. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what an impression I made on the boss." So anyway, so I was at a level where I could play professional, but it requires a lot of energy and time, and I had other pursuits, food for life and so on, and it was not practical for me. But I had enough passion that I decided to design a training device, which became the world's best aiming device based on geometry. It's called the Billiard Aim Trainer, and it's a little gadget that you can use to define what the angle is on the table and shows you exactly how to cut the ball in the pocket. So that became a best-selling item, and then I wrote a book called The Yoga of Pool, and the idea behind that was to not only teach about the fundamentals of playing billiards, but to give a spiritual perspective, because in any sport, psychology is super important. Like the top athletes in the world, they know how to control their mind. They understand the power of the mind and the power of focus. And obviously, I became an expert in this as a monk, because you can imagine at the age of 19 to 33, practicing celibacy, you really need to know how to control your mind and senses. So I started to write books like that, giving a perspective that billiards players had not seen before. Like, it wasn't just mundane sports psychology, but it was a spiritual approach where when we talk about confidence and positivity, I would explain to them, okay, the way to draw real positivity and real confidence is understanding that you're not just a physical form, you're not even the mind, you're a spiritual being, you're animating this physical form. And so that book to this day is one of the best-selling billiards books on the market.
You got married in 1998.
I was married for like 9 years. That marriage didn't last, and I got remarried again. But I have a daughter who's 25, and I'm married again now to Juliana. Is a Colombian woman who's an amazing, inspirational figure, particularly in Colombia. She founded the first animal sanctuary in South America, like farm animal sanctuary. And
it's named after her.
Juliana's Animal Sanctuary, because you're supposed to say Juliana, because that's the way to say it in Spanish. But Juliana's Animal Sanctuary is the first, and now to date is the only certified animal sanctuary by the Global Federation of Farm Sanctuaries. And so she's the
only one in South America?
In South America. Okay. She's an inspirational figure because she started rescuing animals when she was 5 years old, when she became a vegetarian. And her story is another story. You have to interview her. She's amazing. And so we live now on the animal sanctuary in Colombia. And that's part of our life. Our child, our little boy, Bimmel Fox, he's grown up with animals as his family. He's a natural vegan because for him, the cow and the bulls and the goats and the llamas, they're his brother and sister. It's like, that's his family. Yeah. It's very natural to him.
Yeah, you showed me some images on Instagram. He has an Instagram. Every other photo or so, he's hugging up on a cow or something.
Yeah.
And he's vegan from birth, like you're saying.
Vegan from birth.
Yeah, which is really cool. And you have over 250 animals there?
250. I mean, Julian has rescued maybe 3,000 animals over the years, but we have about 250 animals, maybe 300. It varies a little bit. A lot of smaller animals, lots of rabbits and chickens and things. That's what pushes the numbers up. But it's a 10-acre property, so it's a pretty tight sort of arrangement. We have to manage the animals very carefully, but they all have beautiful shelters and grazing areas, and they get first-class medical care. We even use like acupuncture sometimes to heal animals. There was one horse we rescued recently, and it came with a broken shoulder. His name is Rocinante. He's a beautiful red-colored horse, stallion, and he broke his shoulder. He couldn't walk. He was totally immobile. But rather than killing him, Juliana says, no, we'll take him. We'll nurse him back to health. And through acupuncture and Reiki and just love and care, he's now walking and starting to trot. An animal that would normally be, you know, just ridden off because a broken shoulder in a horse is pretty much a, you know, a done deal.
That's so beautiful. And you have a cow also that's only got, he's missing a leg.
We have a little bull. His name is Forrest. And Forrest came to us from a slaughterhouse. He had one of his legs chopped off. I can't remember the exact story why, but one of his legs was chopped off. And we took him in, and now he hobbles around. We're making a prosthetic for him right now, so he can. But he's a beautiful little boy.
Yeah, and is that the one with the heart on the head?
No, the one with the heart is actually, he's the star of the show. His name is Balaram, and he's a 1,500-pound bull that Juliana rescued from birth. So the story behind that is that his mother jumped the fence on another property that Juliana had before I met her. His mother jumped the fence. It was a dairy farm. Had the little baby calf on her property. The farmer came over in a hissy fit. Oh, this is mine, you know. And Juliana says, no, he's born on my property. I want to take him now. And I think she may have given him a couple of dollars or something like that. But she took him in. But that little boy, Balaram, which means the Lord of power, great strength. Little Balaram had a beautiful heart on his forehead. And she then became his mother, de facto mother. She would feed him milk, bottled milk, a big bottle of milk every day. And he grew up literally with her as his mother.
Oh, that's beautiful. Is that like one of her first?
Yeah, one of the first rescues. Yeah, it was the second one. She had a cow at the time that she rescued also from a slaughterhouse. And he became her little boy. And he's 16 or 17. He's the most gentle spirit on the farm, and he's the biggest.
What is a day of eating like for you?
Well, I practice, intermittent fasting. I really believe strongly in that. As a monk, we did that all the time, but I didn't know it was called intermittent fasting. But we would fast on spiritual holidays and so on, like we'd fast the whole day. There were some days where I would take it to the extreme, where I'd fast all day, wouldn't even drink water, and then chant 64 rounds of mantras, which would take about 10 hours. So I'd do 10 hours of meditation, no water, no food, wouldn't sleep, I'm up all night. That was like the austerity that you would perform, and you would do this for spiritual purification. So we would do extreme things like that. And of course, from a physical perspective, it's like pretty radical, but also cleansing. I mean, if you have it under control, it's a very cleansing experience, but more importantly, it was very purifying, very powerful transformation of the mind. Like you really got to control the mind. The mind became your best friend. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned as a monk is like the mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. It's really up to you. And the way I explain this to people is because most people, when they think of the mind, they think the mind is them. They think, I am the mind. When the thoughts come into our head, we think that's me. But it's actually not. It's an energy, a tool that we use to navigate this material world. So the way to understand the difference is like this. If you're standing on the top of a building, on the edge of a building, and you're looking over and it's very high, the mind will kick in and say, oh, I wonder if you can fly. I wonder what it would be like if you could just jump off the building, what would happen? So the mind is like the out-of-the-box creative element that we use to navigate. But then there's another factor that comes in, and that's the intelligence. It's totally different. And the intelligence is focused on logic. And the intelligence will say, well, that's crazy. You don't have wings. You're not a bird. That's just silly. So there's this narrative going on between the mind's creative problem-solving mechanism and then the logical functioning of the intelligence. There's a narrative, a conversation going on. But someone's witnessing that conversation, and that's the soul. It's very, very subtle. So there's a subtle distinction between these three elements, which most people don't understand. So you're watching this conversation take place. The mind's come up with crazy ideas, the intelligence, analyzing and deciding if it's a good idea or not. But you're listening, you're watching that conversation.
It sounds like you're saying the soul is the cumulative experiences.
No, it's separate.
The experiences, observing the interaction.
That's the observer. The soul is the observer. Yeah. That's how you can understand. It's one of the ways in which you can understand the source of consciousness. Because consciousness is everything. The difference between a dead body and a live body is consciousness. Everything is there. Blood's there, air's there, heart's there, all the organs are there, but something's missing. Something has left the body, and that's consciousness. And consciousness is the seat of the soul. The source of consciousness is the soul. That's how we can understand what the soul is. It's not simply, you don't have a soul, you are the soul. You're the animator of physical form. You are the energy which actually makes all of this happen.
Do you think animals have a soul?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you know that?
Well, there's consciousness. There's consciousness. There's awareness. They have feelings. They can express emotions. They have love. They have hate. They have attachment, and so on. All these different ways they express, they show that they're a conscious living thing. And consciousness is the source of the soul. So the difference is that, and this is where Hinduism in particular can answer a lot of these questions about what it means to be, a living being in this material world. The soul is energy, pure energy, and energy can't be destroyed. Energy simply just changes shape. So as we traverse through this material experience, we are taking on different forms according to our consciousness, according to our karma, past activities, our desires, what we want, and our consciousness. The combination of those things actually just determines the physical form that we inhabit, the vehicle that we get to traverse this material world. So right now we're human beings. We have by good fortune, by good karma, by good acts in the past life, we've been given this opportunity as humans to navigate in a human form. And of course there's variations with that as well. You're born in this country, you're born in that country, you have bad parents, you have good parents. So there's a lot of factors which play out, and it's all based on past activity and your desire. What you desire and what you deserve. Animals are another experience that people can have. Someone's got to be a dog. Someone has to be a chicken. There's a person inside, there's a soul, you can look in the eyes of an animal and you can see consciousness. You can see that there's someone inside that body trying to express itself through that physical form and the limitations that it has. It may even be a case where it has really developed consciousness, but it's stuck in this form and it's super frustrating. In most cases, the consciousness matches the physical form. So in other words, if you think, well, it doesn't make sense that someone could be a dog because, in your consciousness now as a human, that would be traumatizing. That would be horrific. Oh my God, I'm a dog. I'm scratching myself from fleas and I'm, sniffing butts. But in the form that you're given at the time of birth matches your consciousness. So you have a certain understanding which goes along with that physical form. So it's appropriate.
I'm curious where the line is. Would this apply to insects as well?
Yeah, well, it does, but as I said, it's the consciousness is matching the physical form. So an insect obviously has a very, very limited awareness. And it's just going through the process. A moth lives for 24 hours. And that's 100 years to the moth, literally. That 24-hour period is a whole lifetime to the moth. So for it's it's normal. We look at it and we think, oh my, the poor moth, it's really sad, it dies in one day. So the consciousness matches the physical forms. Just like in human form, there's levels, right? You have really stupid people and you have really intelligent, smart people. They have the same physical form, but some people are really stupid. And that's just the way it is. Because their consciousness is matching where they're at karmically and what they have to experience in this particular circumstance. So you have certain lessons to learn, certain experiences to have. So you may deny them, but they're going to play out in some point. In some way, those lessons are going to play out because you have to learn them. The whole purpose is to elevate your consciousness, to gradually get to a point where you don't even need a physical form anymore. You're beyond the physicality and you can actually transcend physicality. You can transcend this material realm and not reincarnate again. That's the whole purpose.
Knowing these things, knowing that there's stupid people and there's, different forms and all these things, does this help you deal with living in a violent world where it can be really hard for somebody who's vegan?
Yeah, it's frustrating, and you see the idiocy and the violence and the inhumane actions of people, it's like, how you think, well, why are they like that? Why are they so callous? Why they don't care? They're so self-centered, and you understand, well, that's simply where they're at karmically. They have to go through this. They have to have those experiences. They have to suffer in certain ways to play out the lessons that they need to learn. But that's not their only life. So when you look at the big picture, it makes sense. If you think of life, the human experience as like this one lifetime, you're missing the whole point. You're literally looking at one page of a book, one frame of a movie, when you look at this one life. It doesn't define who we really are. It's literally like one page. You're trying to tell me that you read one page of a book and you understand the whole book? Not possible. So you have to see the bigger picture. Step back and see that we are energy. We are eternal spiritual energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. This is science. Science backs this up. Energy cannot be destroyed. So as energetic beings, we cannot die. Death is an illusion. When we see the bigger picture that we're going through different forms, different bodies, with different consciousness, we're playing out our karma and our experiences, and we're either going down or going up, or going up and then going down again. We're moving around. If you see the bigger picture, then it all makes sense. That's why that person's an idiot. That's why that person is very wealthy, because in his past life he did a lot of charitable activities, he did a lot of good service to the community, so he's being rewarded in the next life with opulence. And now it's his responsibility, or her responsibility, to use that wealth for the good of man, for the good of humanity. Otherwise, they'll go back again. So you always have choices to make. And the more better choices we make, the quicker we get to escaping this material boundary.
Now, does this help you with your interactions with others? Because sometimes it's very frustrating dealing with others who don't even care.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It does. When you see the bigger picture, it's like, okay, you just tolerate it. It's like, that's where they're at. There's a saying in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm paraphrasing, but like, don't even waste your time trying to teach stupid people, because some people are just not ready to listen. No one is more deaf than someone that doesn't want to hear. Put the fingers in the air, like, I don't want to hear you. And we're seeing that play out now. I mean, there are people that literally have a cult mentality, and you can present the facts to them, and yet they don't want to hear you, unfortunately. That's really where they're at consciously, and we just have to accept that they have to have that certain experience, but ultimately they will get to the end goal, but it just may take a bit longer.
And we still need to role model excellence if we can.
Absolutely. People need to see, what is right, what is wrong. I mean, we all have something to learn. I mean, no one is a truly wise person understands that they always have to learn. There's always something to learn. You never get to the end of wisdom.
And while you don't really want to waste your time on somebody who appears to be obstinate or benighted or whatever, rather than treat it fatalistically, it's still important to do something, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to see that there's a spiritual essence that animates all of us. So on an energetic level, we're energetically connected. So the way I present this in my book, Food Yoga, one of the things I had to do, and this gets back to the food philosophy of Food for Life Global. So at Food for Life Global, we believe that food is a medium of intention. We believe that when you prepare food with a loving intention, it has the ability to shift consciousness, to uplift consciousness, because love is one of the ingredients. So when we talk about nutrition, and this is where a lot of even the great vegan nutritionists, they don't really touch on this, because it's a very subtle aspect which can only be brought into the conversation for someone that's had experience on that spiritual path. Like, there's a subtle aspect to even preparing food. There's a subtle aspect to the way we nourish our being. And your intentions are one of those ingredients. The people that are touching that food, they're leaving an energetic signature on that food. And that's something you're also consuming. At Food for Life Global, we believe that food is a great communicator. It is a great carrier of intention. And when food is prepared with love, it not only can nourish the body, the physical body, it can nourish the mind and the soul as well. So we believe in complete nutrition because we're not just a physical form. If we're just physical form, you're missing the whole point. There's a subtle aspect to who we are. As I said, I've said a few times that we're animating physical form. We, the real person within, is what's most important, because like a bird in a cage, right? It's horrible, right? Visually it's horrible, a bird stuck in a cage. But the old lady, she's feeding the bird, and she's feeding the bird with love. Oh, I love you, Polly want a cracker. And all of a sudden she decides, oh, the cage, let's make sure the cage is also taken care of. So she starts cleaning the cage, and she forgets to feed Polly the cracker. And eventually Polly dies because she's focused on the cage, keeping the cage clean, and she forgets to feed the bird, and all of a sudden the bird's dead. So in the same way, if we just focus on the physicality, the physical expression of who we are, we're missing the essence. We have to nourish our spirit as well. The concept of food yoga is the idea that yoga means to unite, to connect. So food is one of the most practical, efficient ways to connect to your spirituality, to connect to someone else on a very intimate, deep level. And we all have this experience. Every single culture in the world has some type of food ritual or cultural expression of like uniting people around food. Whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah, we all have this experience that food has this magic power to like get us all together. All of a sudden we've forgotten the things which divided us, the arguments we had, the political differences, whatever. All of a sudden we're family.
Unless you're a vegan going to a non-vegan.
That's a problem, yeah. But the idea, the concept is true, and that is food has this power to communicate. Because if I give you a plate of food and it's prepared with love, I don't have to speak a word, but you're going to know that I care about you and I see you as an equal. I see you as someone to be respected.
This reminds me of comfort food, right?
Yeah.
And comfort food, what that even means. And people associate eating animals with comfort food because it was something their family gave them as an expression of love, right?
Yeah, that's a sad part about it, is that people are conditioned. They're conditioned to think that this is normal, like serving a leg of a ham on the table is like a normal thing to do. It's amazing how easily we can be manipulated, by external sources, unfortunately. So that's why it's so important to have good association. And this is one of the things we learned also as monks, that association was pretty much on the top of things you needed to focus on if you wanted to be successful.
What do you mean by association? Like who you associate with?
Who you hang out with. Mm-hmm. That's a really, really determining factor. If you hang out with like low class people, it's going to impact you in a very negative way. You hang out with intelligent, inspiring people, they're going to raise you up.
This reminds me of also people who fail at being vegan. A lot of times, I imagine it's due to the people that they're associated with. I mean,
exactly.
One of the people I was interviewing one time, the tip they had was, if you're trying to go vegan, find somebody who's really good at being vegan. Make friends with them.
Yeah. And that's the same in business. Like if you want to be successful in business, hang out with wealthy, successful business people. It's just a basic rule of success. So it's the same in every aspect of life, whether it's veganism, spirituality, health, fitness, whatever. Hang out with people that have excelled in that sphere, and you will naturally just be lifted up. Without even changing what you're doing, it'll just lift you up. It'll transform you in a positive way. So food yoga is the concept of using food to create this sense of unity with each other, but it's also a way to nourish mind, body, and spirit. Food is traditionally, around the world, it's been used to unite people. So we have a mission at Food for Life Global, and that is to create peace and prosperity in the world. So you imagine a world that's peaceful and prosperous, right? And that's pretty much a happy world, right? Right? Those two things, peaceful and prosperous. Everyone's got what they need, they're prosperous, and everyone's happy, they're content, they're peaceful. Creating a peaceful and prosperous world by the liberal distribution of plant-based meals prepared with a loving intention. That's our mission. It's a very simple solution to world hunger, not just world hunger, it's a solution to all the world's problems. This is where we're really different in this space, Because not only, as I mentioned, do we cook at high scale, we cook freshly cooked meat, we serve freshly cooked meals, it's vegan, right? But none of our cooks even taste the food before they serve it to the public. Because for us, we're giving this food as a gift to you. Like if you're buying your wife a box of chocolates, would you take one of the chocolates out?
I might.
Really?
Nah.
She would not accept it. You know what I'm saying? If you took one of the, you had, say there's 40 chocolates and you took one out, she would think, I don't want that gift anymore. That's not a gift. You've already tasted it, right? So it's the same thing. If you're preparing food and you want to prepare it with love, full, like really invested with love and good intention, you can't taste the food. So none of our cooks taste the food when they prepare the meals. And then they serve it to the public. It's a gift to you. As a result of that, that makes the food very, very special. Very high, we call high vibration. We call it, in the tradition that I grew up in as a monk, it's called prasadam. Prasadam means like blessed food. It's high energy food. So this idea of nourishing mind, body, and spirit is important because, first of all, it's nourishing our complete being, and secondly, it is the way to lift consciousness. It's a way to create this sense of unity and peace and respect in the world. Because if you imagine a world where we saw each other as brother and sister, like there's all of these things which divide us, different color, skin color, different political faction, whatever. All those things which divide, those artificial things which divide us, if they just dissolved into like, hey, you're an energetic being, I'm an energetic being, I'm an earthling, you're an earthling, the cow is an earthling, the bull, the dog, all earthlings, we're all in this together, we're all interdependent, we need each other to make this ecosystem work, to function in a happy, content way. If we saw ourselves in that way, things like world hunger would disappear overnight.
Yeah, and communities would probably become stronger.
Everything.
Less violent.
All the problems would disappear overnight. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And it's not even necessarily a religious thing. Mm-hmm. It's just a shift of perception. Like, it's not like you have to become a Christian and surrender to Jesus. No, it's not about that. It's just like understanding energetic, this is science. We're energetic beings. We're not simply just chemicals, carbon and fiber. Like, we are energetic beings animating physical form.
Now, sometimes I hear that the vibration thing, the energy thing, mostly coming from like raw vegans. Mm-hmm. But you cook your food, so...
I was a raw vegan for 2 years. I went down that path too.
Are you losing some of that vibration in the cooking process?
No, you're not. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Food in its natural state, it's important to eat food in its natural state, the way God intended, but there is some food which needs the fire element. That's just a fact. And this is where the raw food movement breaks down, because they're assuming, in some cases, that everyone has the same biology, everyone has the same circumstance, everyone's living in the same environment. No, it's not. Some people live in very cold climates and they need the fire element in their body. You're not going to get that from just eating chili. You literally need to turn the stove on and add fire to that food and transform the structure of that food so it can be digested successfully and you get the full nutrition. Because if you eat like raw broccoli as opposed to steamed broccoli, you'll get much more nutritional benefit from steamed broccoli than raw broccoli.
Or at least, and carrots and tomatoes especially.
Yeah, things like, so some foods need to be cooked and you need that fire element. This is where it gets down to the elemental level. And so, as I said, we're all energy. We're essentially made up of the five elements. According to the Bhagavad Gita, there are 8 elements which define everything in our human experience. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So everything that we physically experience is made up of those 5 elements. So those 5 physical elements really make up, you can break everything down to those 5 elements, the combination of those 5 elements, but then there's 3 subtle elements which add to the palette of consciousness, and it's mind, intelligence, and false ego. They're the 3 they're material subtle elements. Mind, so you have the physical form, then you have the next energy is the mind, but even above the mind is the intelligence. It's even more subtle, and then even more subtle is the ego. That's the final the thing which keeps us bound to this material plane, where I misidentify ourself as a body. It's called a false ego. So it's the ego, which is like you're looking at yourself and you think, you know, I'm an Australian, I'm a this person or that person. We're defining ourselves by physical appearance. But above all of those energies is spirit.
It kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier in respect to our creative side, and then there's the intelligent side.
Analytical side.
And then there's there's the consciousness.
Well, it's sort of like that, but there's what I didn't mention is the ego. That's another factor which comes into play. Like the ego is where we misidentify ourselves as a physical form. So it's called a false ego. In Sanskrit, it's called ahankara. Ahankara. It's ahankara. It's like misidentifying. You're looking in the mirror and you're thinking, that's me. I'm looking at me. But no. You're the soul looking through those eyes, and this is just your vehicle now that you're using to express yourself in this material realm. It's a very subtle difference. But we're trained, and this is the unfortunate thing about modern education, we're trained to think, you know, you're this body, you're an Australian. And I can understand there's some benefits in terms of like managing the society, like, you know, you're the national consciousness, like you're an American, you're like, and I can understand that helps in terms of like management, but from a spiritual perspective, it's completely false. We're not American, we're not Italian, we're not Australian. We're a spiritual being having this human experience.
Some time ago, I asked, what does a day of eating look like for you? And you went to fasting, and it was like, I guess you don't eat.
Yeah, I know, sorry. So, well, I don't eat until 11 o'clock normally. Yeah. So I did it. So, yeah, I was getting back to like this whole experience that I had with like being a little bit detached, because it requires a sense of detachment, like where you have to detach yourself. Okay, I'm not the body, I can do this. You know, and this is how you can transcend and learn to control your senses and your mind if you learn to like detach yourself a little bit. And of course we learned that in a very strong way as monks. We had to detach ourselves. We had to be really disconnected. Anyway, so what do I eat? I mean, I normally do intermittent fasting. So I stop eating around 7 o'clock, 7:30. And then I don't eat the next day until about 11 o'clock. So I'll drink 1.5 liters of water in the morning, the first thing. And I'll put apple cider vinegar and 1 squeeze of lemon, 1 whole lemon juice, and I'll drink, that'll be the first thing I drink, 1.5 liters of water. So I'll cleanse the body, hydrate the system, alkalize the blood, right? And basically just prepare the stomach for food when it's that time. And so usually I'll do that at 7, between 7 and 8, and then I won't eat until 11 o'clock. So I'll have like, I always have smoothies every day. So like an acai, you know, banana smoothie with almonds and so on. And then I'll have lunch around 2 or 3 o'clock. And then I'll have a little dinner at about 7 or 7:30 or something like that.
Like for lunch and dinner, what kind of things? Like what kind of variety or staples do you try to get?
So I like, yeah, in the morning I'll have my smoothie with avocado on toast or maybe granola, something like that. And then for lunchtime, I'll have like rice, beans. Avocados are like abundant in Colombia. They're like so cheap. Every day of the year, avocados are available. It's a very opulent place in terms of food. So I'd have rice, beans, dal, soups, avocados, a little bit of salad like sprouts and things like that. And then at dinner time, I'll have fruit. Is pretty much a common thing. Sometimes I'll have more soup and toast, but depending on the day, how much hard I worked.
Food for Life. I can't help but think of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They have a program called Food for Life. And I think when I mentioned that to you when I first met you, you said there's quite a few people that have used that over the years.
Yeah, so the story goes that when we formed Food for Life back in the day, I mean, there was a Food for Life baking company in California. And I think they're the oldest business to use the term Food for Life. It's called Food for Life Baking, somewhere in California. And we came up in 1980. Before that, it was just a food relief organization, and it was called ISKCON Food Relief. In 1980, we came up with, it was called Hare Krishna Food for Life. And that was the first use of that, outside of the bakery, that was the first time that phrase had ever been used in any sort of, at least in food relief. But over the years, I noticed that many people sort of resonated with that concept of food for life. And so I saw beauty products, spas, Dr. Neil Barnard's, PCRM, like the health education program. And I was thinking, it's all positive. It's a positive expression of this term, and it's not a problem. So I don't see them as competitors. It's like we're all in this together to make the world a better place. So we are now Food for Life Global, and our thing is feeding people around the world and creating a sense of unity. And PCRM is, Food for Life for like health education and so on. But Neil, if you're listening to this, we should definitely work together. We should collaborate, because what you're doing is amazing, and what we're doing is amazing. So hey, more good people need to work together.
You have a quote you want to share?
Yeah. So the thing that I always try to leave people with, the most important message I want to convey, even with my life, not just in this moment, and that is what I learned as a monk, and it was a really defining thing. My teacher, he told me that spiritual life begins with the tongue. The idea behind that is that the tongue is the most difficult sense to control. It's the most difficult. Like even as monks, if we control the tongue, we could actually control the other senses and the genitals. But it's actually started with controlling the tongue. So the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. What you speak and what you eat has a tremendous impact in your consciousness. So if you're just speaking nonsense all the time, that's going to destroy, it's going to lower your consciousness. If you're just eating garbage all the time, fast foods and low vibration food which is invested with violence and sadness and so on, that's going to lower your consciousness. If you're eating light foods which are prepared with love, high vibration, high energetic foods, it's going to lift your consciousness. If you're speaking positively, if you're speaking affirmations of positivity, if you're speaking the truth, if you're using your tongue to vibrate high energy sounds and eat high energy food, it's going to lift your consciousness naturally. So I rephrase that lesson that I learned from him, and it's spiritual evolution. So evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue. If you just learn and understand that one thing, that will transform your life tremendously. Evolution of consciousness, your consciousness will evolve naturally without even really trying too hard. It'll just naturally expand if you master the tongue.
And that's the quote right there?
That's it. Yeah. Evolution of consciousness begins when you master the tongue. And you have to understand, Jeff, is that this journey is going to meander, where it's not a straight line. From beginning to end, it's never a straight line. You're taking pit stops, you're going up, you're going down. It's a really crazy sort of journey that we're on. And everyone's very different. Everyone's got their certain experiences to have, certain lessons to learn. And so at one point we're really into spirituality, and we're doing austerities and trying to improve ourselves. And another point we're just chilling and just cruising along, because that's the time to cruise along. You're meant to just do that at that particular time. So don't let that bother you.
Appreciate that.
It's a long journey.
Yeah.
It's a long, long journey. And we just have to try to make the best decisions we can at every single point, so that the journey is not too chaotic, and we get to that end point at a decent time.
Do you think we'll see a vegan world?
No, I don't think so. I think, to be honest with you, I think the karma and consciousness of people is so diverse, so different. You're always going to get certain people that are just embedded in their belief that violence and selfishness is like the way to get ahead. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be this competing factor of where people are just really degenerate in their awareness and their consciousness, and they're always going to be those types of people. Mm-hmm. So even if you create, yes, there'll be things will get better, because we can see consciousness raising. Yeah. People are starting to wake up. But there'll always be those elements which will just be stubborn and just not move. It's just where they're at karmically. And this material world's not perfect. And that's the thing we have to understand. We have to come to terms with that. We're not living in a spiritual world. We're living in a really crazy place. I mean, in one perspective, it's like a mental asylum, and it's being run by the crazy people. I mean, this material world is a really crazy place. And this is not where we belong. That's the thing. We don't belong here. We're not meant to stay here.
Is Elon Musk taking us where we're supposed to go?
I don't know. Well, we're not meant to stay here. Like, it's a very gross sort of analogy that my teacher once said. He says, a gentleman does his business, goes to the toilet and gets out as soon as possible. He doesn't linger in the toilet stall. He does his business and gets out. So in the same way, we need to understand, okay, this material experience, I've got to go through this process, I've got to learn my lessons, but you don't hang out here. This is not the place to stay. You've got to get out of here. And I'm talking not going to another planet. I'm talking transcend and going to a higher level of consciousness, a higher plane of a higher frequency. This is not everything this is not the whole world. What we experience with these eyes is just one frequency, one, expression of the material world. But there are many, many levels. Right now in this room, there's so much going on, but we can't see it with these physical eyes. But there's things happening on other frequencies that our consciousness can't see because we're not tuned into it. So as you raise your consciousness, as you purify your mind, purify your senses, you expand your consciousness, it starts to change the way you perceive the world, and you'll start to be more in touch with these more subtle aspects. But if you continue to think that this gross world is everything that the world is, you're missing 99% of the whole story.
Do you have any encouraging or last minute, words that you would like to, anything that we didn't cover that you think would be great to get out there as well? I'm sure it's probably easy for people to think, man, what's the point, or something.
Yeah, you're right, actually, I get it. I mean, don't be discouraged like when I say that, because I think, okay, if there's going to be a vegan world, it's not going to happen in our lifetime. So we have to just come to terms with that. There's too much going on right now that it's just not going to transform so magically overnight. So we have to just get to terms with that. We have to see the bigger picture. But we can only play our part. So in this particular life, we all have a purpose, right? Every single life we have a purpose. We have something we need to achieve, a legacy we need to leave. So we need to be the best version of ourselves. Do something which is meaningful and uplifting, leaves a positive legacy, service to others, service to the community, service to the planet, service to animals. We have to be the best version of ourselves. And if we do that, that's all that God, nature, that's all that they can expect of us if we just do our best. But if we underuse our talents, if we misuse our talents, and we just miss the whole purpose of life and thinking that it's all about self-gratification and fame and name and just be bewildered by these illusions, then unfortunately, we're wasting the opportunity.
It seems like you're doing a great job using your skills and talents and doing all you can.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's another aspect of spirituality which is really important to understand. Because when most people think of spirituality, they think of renouncing the world. They think of running away from responsibility. No. It's embracing responsibility. It's using your talents in the service of humanity, in the service of God, in the upliftment of consciousness. Use your talents in those ways and not use them in selfish, degrading ways. So it's not about running away from the material world. It's understanding your situation, embracing it, and making the best use of a bad bargain.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you're doing that. And I'm doing the best I can too, man.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be hard on yourself. And that's the thing is, like, no one's better than anyone else. I mean, yeah, I'm part of something that's really far out and nice, but I don't feel myself better than anyone. I'm just a regular person, a soul trying to just do, make good decisions and make the world a better place. We all have the same potential. None of us are better.
You really do, I think, personify that. Well, thank you again.
Anyway, thank you.